let's talk to our next guest about that and so much more. He is Andrew Handel. He is the Education and Workforce Development Task Force Director at the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, alec.org. And he joins us once again on the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show. Andrew, good afternoon. Welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back with you.
So, Andrew, for maybe the folks who are big defenders of big, giant public education and think it can do no wrong, who are freaking out about the federal Department of Ed, the curtailing of it, the dismantling of it, the defunding of it, whatever Donald Trump and Linda McMahon are going to finally do with it. Would you put everyone at ease, Andrew, and let them know that public education in this country will continue to go forward and perhaps even better, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Public education is going to keep, going strong, regardless of what the administration does. There's still a couple of different plans that they could take. But the gist of it is what the administration wants to do is send education authority back to the states. That's the key thing. And that's where all of this revolves around. So, there's a lot of things that have been mentioned, like Title I funding for low income schools and special education funding. It's really, really important to emphasize those programs aren't going anywhere. They might be moved to other agencies. They might give the states more authority and autonomy over those. But none of that funding is disappearing here in the short term. It's not like we're going to have an implosion overnight of public schools. That's super, super important to emphasize. But I mean, you've seen states like Missouri doing some really cool things, expanding school choice and making more schools accessible to families. So we're really excited for that. And I think you're going to see more of that.
Andrew, the defenders of the Department of Education say that only 10% of the money goes to the states, that the states fund education. I think locally, that's the point they're trying to make. So is the other 90% overhead and salaries? Yeah,
a lot of money is definitely spent on compliance costs and administrative costs and things like that. I mean, it'll vary depending on the type of program, but one of the interesting things is if you can, take a program where maybe let's say 47% of the total money that's being spent is being spent on compliance, and if you can shave that all the way down to even 10%, I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of additional dollars that the states might be able to see as a result of that, because there's so much money, exactly to your point, that's not trickling down to the kids and to the teachers and the schools. It's getting tied up in this bureaucratic mess. And so, I think that's one of the biggest things that the administration is trying to do here is make these programs run more efficiently. And if that means moving them to a different agency, then that's certainly something they're going to look at.
Yeah, that's the problem, Andrew, isn't it? Is that the federal Department of Education isn't spending a lot of its time, money, and bureaucracy on education itself, right? And if that money, especially, is block granted back to the states, that might deliver better results, right? Because, Andrew, aren't we spending more money than ever by far on education at the federal level? And aren't we getting worse results?
That's exactly it, Tim. Yeah, I mean, the best way I can put it is, we've been measuring through the nation's report card, we've been measuring things like 4th and 8th grade reading since about the early 1990s is when we started looking at those scores. And believe it or not, scores today are somehow lower than they were in the early 1990s when we first started looking at this. So I think that is the perfect illustration, right? The Department of Education was created in 1979, and they've spent trillions of dollars since then, and clearly we have gotten nowhere with that. So it's high time that we send this authority back to the states. The states are the ones who are ultimately responsible for providing this education to these kids. And, it's really important to emphasize that, what works well for Missouri, for example, might not work well for Colorado or Texas, so it's really important that we put those states back in charge and let them figure out what is going to work best for their communities and their students.
Andrew, of course, it will take an act of Congress to completely eliminate the Department of Education. But how bare bones can the president get this department just through executive orders?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that they can do. Some of the more significant programs like, student loans, would require an act of Congress. But there's so many different programs and, appropriations that Congress gives the department. And, I think the secretary has pretty broad authority to kind of change things around with those, whether that's moving it to a different agency or, perhaps even just withholding the funds, depending on what they want to do. So, but the big programs like Title I and special education and things like that, those are probably going to require an act of Congress. And I know Senator Cassidy, who chairs the Senate Education Committee, has already said he's working with the administration to draft something to make that a reality. So I think they're still working through that, but the administration is going to do everything they can within their power right now, and then hopefully Congress can step in and take care of the rest.
Andrew Handel is with the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org, and he focuses there on education as the task force director for education and workforce development. Andrew, one of the things we could do with all this money would be to give it back to the parents for them to make the choice as to what to do with their kids' education. President Donald Trump has said a bazillion times he's a huge fan of educational freedom and choice. I know you all at ALEC are as well. You even have a national report card that you look at every year. Andrew, how are the states doing that have more educational choice options versus the ones that don't?
Yeah, definitely the states that have more educational options are definitely doing better. As you mentioned, we just released our brand new 2025 Index of State Education Freedom, which looks at a couple of different categories. We look at, charter schools, homeschooling, virtual schooling, as well as what funding programs the state might have in place. So, are dollars truly following students, or are they tied up in a, public school bureaucracy? And, Florida ranked number one in our report once again this year. We were excited to see Governor DeSantis gave it a shout out in his State of the State. But definitely the states that are leaning on parents and recognizing that they are the ones best positioned to pick the best school for their kids. The states that recognize that and pass programs to that effect definitely perform the best. And we've just seen an absolute explosion in these types of programs over the past couple of years. I mean, we now have 15 different states that have passed universal education freedom programs. So every single student is eligible to apply and make sure that those state education dollars follow them to whatever school is best for them. So, hopefully we'll see Missouri on that list soon as well.
Andrew, it's my understanding that the teachers' unions were originally against the formation of the Department of Education back in 1977. Do you know the reasons why, and why are they embracing it now, do you think?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting for teachers. I think that closing the department down and transferring those authorities elsewhere, if anything, I would say it helps teachers, right? We want to bring education, as close to these students and families as we possibly can. So, it's interesting that, they were, supportive of it as opposed to it. I think ultimately the important thing to emphasize here, though, is it's going to be a good thing for teachers, too. It helps eliminate all that red tape that Secretary McMahon was talking about in your earlier clip. There's so much of that comes with federal money. And, if we can just bundle all that up and block grant it out to the states with no strings attached, that's going to be a lot better for teachers. It's going to make their lives a lot easier.
Could be teachers' raises, right? Possibly.
Yeah, maybe, I think, what it'll do is put the states back in charge. So, if a state like Missouri finds that they've got some extra funding now as a result of block granting that, or, they want to take money from a program that they weren't using, they certainly could put it towards teacher raises.
Andrew, help us bust one of the myths we often hear. People say, well, if you give parents all this choice and this freedom in education and allow them to use their taxpayer dollars as they best see fit for their children, it's going to be the end of public education as we know it. Andrew, it's my understanding that Florida, as you just mentioned, and Texas have some of the most robust educational choice programs in the country, and they've had them for a long time. Andrew, I haven't heard that they've closed all the public schools in Florida and Texas. They haven't, have they?
No, they have not. They have not. Texas is actually working on a big universal school choice program right now. I know the president has tweeted his support for it. The Senate's already passed something, and the speaker has indicated that he's pushing for it. So we'll see what happens in Texas. But Florida, exactly. For a number of years, Florida has been viewed as the gold standard when it comes to education freedom. And, the public schools in that state are thriving right now, and I think the reason for that is you see the best public schools stay open. When we put parents in charge, if their local public school is still the best choice for their kid, then absolutely they should be able to pick that local public school. And, nothing is going to change from a funding perspective when that kid continues to attend that public school. So, if anything, it actually helps those schools. Per pupil funding rises because you now have less students that you need to teach in the public school. So yeah, really, really important point to make there. Public schools have been just fine in states that have implemented school choice, and if anything, they've started to thrive.
Andrew, as Tim said, you are the Task Force Director for Education and Workforce Development. Tell us about workforce development. What are you working on there?
Yeah. We're doing a couple of different things. Some of it ties into the education side of it, but, we're looking at things like teacher credentialing and, making sure that we not only have high quality teachers in the workforce, but also that we're creating new pathways for adult learners. You might have some folks who would make really good teachers, but right now they're in a different career and they've got kids at home, and they just don't have the time to attend a college class during the day. So we've got some model policy called the Alternative Teacher Credentialing Act that helps create some of those alternative pathways. We've also done some work on public community colleges and helping those to kind of focus their programs and degrees towards critical workforce shortage areas. So yeah, we've done a couple of different things like that, that are equally as exciting and I think just as important for states to emphasize.
Excellent. Andrew Handel with the American Legislative Exchange Council. Folks, I'm looking at the website right now for ALEC. It's ALEC. ALEC.org. You can, right there on the front page is that 2025 ALEC Index of State Educational Freedom. Check it out. Check out ALEC.org. And Andrew, we'll continue to hold our conversations with you about the future of the Federal Department of Education. You'll have to keep us updated on the Trump administration efforts moving forward.